When I first heard the name Dracula 2000, I was a bit taken aback. The title is absolutely horrible. I hated the trend of putting 2000 on the end of something to make it sound modern and fresh. All that does is make it sound horribly dated in just a few years' time. Around the same time, we had Fantasia 2000, Heavy Metal 2000, Pokemon the Movie 2000, and even Blues Brothers 2000. And that one came out in fucking 1998. Aside from that, I thought the Francis Ford Coppola film was perfect, and even though it's 8 years later, it seemed too soon to try and top it. When I saw Dracula 2000, it was with the very lowest of expectations. The film just looked bad, and I disliked the idea of it. Now, while this isn't exactly a great film, I can say that I was pleasantly surprised to be at the least entertained by it. If you're going to do a film like Dracula 2000, the first thing you have to do is instantly hook the viewer with a good premise. The film does this, and then continues to come up with interesting premises throughout. The cast is somewhat strange. You got Gerard Butler as Dracula, he of the pimp hand, Dr. Foreman from House as a thief, and Vitamin C as the Lucy character. At the very least, you'd think the film can be entertaining at a camp level. The film quickly introduces Matthew Van Helsing, played by Christopher Plummer. He claims Abraham was his grandfather, who was a quite normal man who by some bizarre stroke of luck happened to inspire Bram Stoker's novel. By mentioning Stoker's novel early on, the film became interesting to me, as we were dealing with a public who knew the legend of Dracula, so introducing him as real would be a task. Van Helsing is an antiques dealer, and he starts off by looking at antiques with his protege, Simon. Not Simon Belmont, mind you, but that is where my mind went when I heard that. Anyway, though Van Helsing is introduced as the grandson of a man who is the inspiration for a fictional character, you see him inject himself with blood from leeches he keeps hidden pretty early on, and his eyes turn red. Omar Epps plays a thief who, along with a bunch of others, breaks into Van Helsing's vault looking for treasure, but all they find is a silver coffin. It's after this that we learn the truth. Matthew is not Van Helsing's grandson, he is Abraham Van Helsing himself. He's captured Dracula long ago, but found the usual methods of killing a vampire, such as stakes and silver, did not work. No matter what he tried, Dracula would not die, so he just locked him up in a coffin, keeping him in suspended animation. He puts leeches in the coffin to extract Dracula's blood, which he injects into himself, so he could live long enough to figure out a way to destroy Dracula one day. The thieves get the coffin open, and Dracula is loose on the world. He starts off looking old, but very quickly becomes young, a nice nod to the original novel. He kills Van Helsing, but what he's really after is Van Helsing's daughter, Mary, who is related to Dracula because of her father's blood obsession. Simon attempts to protect the daughter, who reminded me of Mina, but of course is called Mary, while Dracula and his newly found brides attempt to bring her into the fold. Near the end of the film, it answers the question of exactly who is Dracula, and it's something you'd never expect. Stoker claimed Dracula to simply be a vampire, and Coppola claimed that he was Vlad the Impaler. But Dracula 2000 takes this much further, saying that Dracula is much, much older, and literally cannot die. The film claims that Dracula is actually Judas Iscariot, the biblical betrayer of Christ. Whether it's for his actual betrayal or for the suicide attempt afterwards, and it depends on who you ask, Judas was cursed with everlasting life. unable to die. He is forced to walk the earth forever. Because of this, he hates the church, which is why he can't stand crosses. And he can't stand silver because it reminds him of the 30 pieces of silver he was paid. Dracula feels that he is the one who was betrayed, as Christ needed him for his plan, and he should have been able to die in peace. The ending of the film has Dracula, or rather Judas, being hanged once again, this time from a cross, and the sun comes up and burns into a crisp. I found the film enjoyable, with some great premises, though it's not perfect. The execution of said premises can be marred by a few scenes which didn't make much sense to me, and a few that were just silly. One example of a scene that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me would be Dracula's death scene. Shortly before the sun comes up and he realizes he's about to get burned, he releases Mary from his influence. You don't really know why he does this. You assume he found forgiveness, because he seems to die. After all, Van Helsing has said in the past that sunlight couldn't kill him. But they later made a sequel, Dracula 2 Ascension, which said that he might have been reduced to a smoldering ash, but he was still alive. Dracula 3 Legacy even made a trilogy out of it. I don't want to really get into those films, except that they're direct-to-video, and while they're not awful, they are not as good as the original. One silly scene is the sex scene between Lucy and Dracula. He seduces her because Dracula is a massive pimp in this film, but as soon as they start to have sex, they start floating. Maybe he's just that good, but she doesn't seem to even notice. Despite these flaws, Dracula 2000 is not as bad as you probably heard it was, and I found the concept interesting, as it not only was an original idea, but gave solid reasons for weaknesses like crosses and silver. Dracula 2000 surprised me. Not enough for me to give it a high score, but I expected it to be awful, and it wasn't. I gave the film a 6 out of a possible 10.